Have you been wanting to remove this Minn Kota trolling motor off the front of your Tracker 175 boat? If so, this is a quick guide to help you understand what all steps are needed. First thing I did is disconnect the battery. This is pretty simple, as I disconnected the two trolling motor 6-gauge wires that come to the back of the boat. Doing so leaves you with I think this is a 50 amp breaker and a small wire connected to the battery. You also have your charger connected to the battery. Once you remove those from the top post of the battery, it's safe to start working with electrical. Please note, when you replace this with a higher powered trolling motor, you may be required to install something with a higher amperage. An example, this is a 60 amp breaker. My trolling motor comes with a requirement to have a 6-gauge wire as a minimum recommended. Fortunately for me, this is already installed, and that's probably what I'm going to stay with. Some people do recommend going down a gauge to, say, a 4-gauge wire and running that back to the back. Please, I always recommend looking at the specifications on your trolling motor to help decide to do so. All right, so I've already got everything torn apart. So what I started with is taking the little things off, like the cup holder. I removed all these little screws that go along where the controller, the foot controller goes, the pedal. It's a simple little Phillips screw. You also have a few sheet metal screws holding the foot pedal in. The panel is just a single piece, carpeted piece, that goes across here. You could use something like a magnetic drill bit to help find some of the screws, because sometimes they're buried into the carpet. You'll typically have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 across there. You'll also want to disconnect. Once you pull that off, you'll see where you can disconnect all the wires that go to the trolling motor plug and the tilt switch. You also have an extra 12-volt power going to your, I think, center console. I also removed 4 sheet metal screws to take the horn assembly out. I needed that to have access to get into this room here. It's pretty tight once you get up there. I'm replacing this. One of the things to note, this has got an 8-gauge wire to it. I don't want to go from a 6-gauge to an 8-gauge back to a 8-gauge. I'm sorry, from an 8 in the middle. 8 in the middle is what we got. I don't want to go from 6 on the trolling motor to an 8-gauge plug to a 6-gauge feed to the battery. I want 6-gauge from the battery all the way to the trolling motor. I'm going to put a new plug in that's rated for the higher amperage and current than the factory one. You don't have to disconnect these little plugs on the end of the switch. That way you don't get them mixed up, because there's a simple plug right here that you can remove from the harness. This makes it really easy to get everything out and ready for your new install. You're going to have two styles of connector going into the trolling motor. You're going to have 4 that have a locking nut with washers. Note, I've got 3. Guess where the other one's at? Somewhere in there. These front 2 are actually going to be more of a screw. And if you notice on the front of your boat, it's a little bit thinner to access. I was getting a little worried because, one, my arm would not fit all the way in. I can only get to about right here. Luckily, these don't have bolts with nuts on them. They just screw in. That's also going to make it easier to hold your trolling motor on while you get these other 4 bolts out. In order to get accessibility to some of these, I had to remove this plastic cover that has 3 screws on each side. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once you take those off, this will just slide and pull off to make it really easy to access all the screws. I was able to do this with a trolling motor in like the halfway position, and that kept it balanced where it wouldn't fall off, and I didn't need someone to hold it. But I do recommend having someone help you to prevent any accidents. So I was able to hold my hand under here. Since this was removed, I was able to fit it through. I used a 7/16 inch ratchet with a deep well socket. And I held this under here with one hand, while the other hand held the drill to remove the screws and bolts. Once I got those removed, I was able to take my hand out, have one hand on the trolling motor, and remove these 2 bolts, screws. And then it came off, and I just picked it up and moved it off the boat. I do recommend cleaning the surfaces really well before you put your new trolling motor on. If your trolling motor doesn't line up to these holes, I do recommend filling those with some type of marine sealant. But other than that, it's just do everything in reverse order to put it back on. Connect everything according to your new trolling motor. I'm going to put a Garmin Force on this. Got a good deal on it this weekend. The only things I had to buy is a new plug that I'm going to take and replace this with, as well as some new batteries. I'm going with a 24-volt single lithium battery. Going to give that a shot and see how it works. It's pretty interesting when you take all this off. What all you can see is you can see my rod locker here. Maybe I can get you a little view up here so you can see what's all in here. All right. Well, I hope this helps you. As I looked up several videos on this, and you can see most people doing it manually. I chose to do a video of everything removed so you kind of see what you're working with and what all parts and components are going to be there. Here's everything for the trolling motor to take off. You'll see I separated small little screws, the sheet metal screws and black screws that held on this cover here. And then you have the panel that goes across the front here. Hope this helps, and hopefully my new trolling motor goes on just as easy as this one came off.